Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. And today we have with us Jeremy Keil, who is a retirement-focused financial planner with Keil Financial Partners. Jeremy, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mike, for having me on.
Hey, it's really great to meet new people, and I see that you are a blogger and a podcaster with the podcast Retirement Revealed. So I just love when I see people that are like-minded and getting the message out there to the communities and really to the airwaves of just using the technology that we have at our fingertips. So I'm excited to learn about what you do for your clients and community and talk about your podcast and your blog. But catch us up to speed on your background and your entrepreneurial journey. What led you to start your agency?
Well, it's fun. It's nice to be able to spread the message of retirement planning with folks through the Retirement Revealed podcast and the blog as well too. So thanks for recognizing that. I figure if you have an ability to do better than average for folks in terms of helping people make good decisions, then you should go find some more folks to help them make better decisions. And the blog and podcast is a great way to do that. Yeah. Well, good. And thanks for asking, too, about our group. We're the Keil Financial Partners, and we focus on retirement, investment, and tax planning. You did mention the term agency there. I'd call us more of a financial planning firm. We are investment advisors, which means we do not make any investment commissions. We're just registered with the investment advisory part of the world, which is the SEC, but we do actually hold our fixed insurance licenses because our goal is to help people who are our clients, and our clients are getting ready for retirement, which means oftentimes they're trying to find out information about long-term care, Medicare supplement insurance, and they're looking for us to be able to help them out. So we do have those insurance licenses to help people with the insurance questions they have. You're at your corporation, your company, your job, and you've got insurance there, and all of a sudden you're kind of thrown into the wild when you retire, and so it's helpful to have someone that knows what they're talking about, and we think we do.
You know, you mentioned several things there that a lot of people might not relate to the word retirement, which is taxes, which is insurance, right? You typically think of money. How much money do I need or will I have, and those type of decisions. But taxes, that's a big piece of it. It's like having that bucket with water kind of flowing through, but it's flowing right back out with all the holes, which are taxes. You got to figure out how to minimize or maximize your tax deductibility. We don't need to get into the weeds there, but I just find that that's a really strong pillar that you mentioned.
Well, it's amazing how much you can control of your taxes in retirement. A lot of times before you retire, you don't have too much control of it. You just make your money, you get your tax forms, you give it to your tax preparer, and you're about done. But you hit retirement, and you have a choice on if you take it from one account or another. And you have a choice on when you start your Social Security. You even have the choice of what months of the year you might take your money out. You take money out in December, but use it in January. That's 2 different tax years. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because I think that people think of many of these decisions as, let me check the box, and you go, here you go, and Social Security, let's claim it here. And well, there's a lot of things that go into that, and if you make the wrong decision, it is irrevocable. So you better know it going in, and just a quick Google search is not going to be sufficient. So working with someone that kind of can guide and navigate that is huge. So when you work with people, typically how far ahead of retirement age are you finding them, recognizing and then coming in to work with you? Because, I know that it's all over the board. Some people are like, I retire in 10 minutes, help. And then sometimes it's like, I retire in 10 years. Let's start a process.
Yeah, the sooner you start, the better. But specifically, it seems like people show up at our door when they're either 53 or 62. And they're about 53 because the kids are off to college, and they look at themselves in the mirror and figure, I got 10 years left before I retire, and I'm starting to freak out. Maybe it's time to make sure I'm on track. Yeah. And then a lot of times people show up when they're 62 because they haven't done any of that stuff, and they've got a date. They're retiring next month, next year, maybe at 65. So they have a specific date, whether it's a few weeks or a few years away, and so they're coming to us for some very specific decisions. And it's just amazing. Not that it's exactly those two specific ages, but it's pretty close a lot of times. You see the reasons why. People are either getting prepared well ahead of time, which is great, but the majority of people come to us because they have a specific date in mind, and they have specific decisions to make about their pension, about their Social Security, about their 401k, any stock they might own with their employer plans, things like that.
And you mentioned college, which, that's a marker in time to say, ooh, I've got this many years left before I want to retire. Well, college for many families can be such the drain financially, which then impedes or depletes retirement accounts. Even if they don't take money out of a retirement account to pay for college, they're taking ready cash flow to use for college. And so I'm sure you have some advice that you would give parents that are dealing with that so that they can then move through that time. And then now let's kind of marry up the time of college with not getting you derailed regarding retirement.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You summed it up pretty well there.
Yeah, I don't even work for you, but that really is the case, because I know I've got kids in college, and it's like, there's no
you're in the zone.
Formula.
You know exactly what people are looking at.
Yeah, there's no easy formula for sure.
Exactly.
So neat. Let's talk about your retirement income process. You have a 5-step process. What does that look like?
Sure. We've got a 5-step retirement income process. We believe you should do things in an order, because if you make decisions that affect future decisions, well, you better focus on the most important things. And a lot of times clients, or even almost more advisors, they only focus on one area. They look at the investments, and should you buy this stock, this bond, this mutual fund, whatever it is. And we think those are important, but those are like way down the list. There's some more important things that you ought to decide first. The first step is, how much will you make in retirement? I'm sorry, I don't know if you're able to redo that, but the first step is actually to figure out how much you spend in retirement. And that's a matter of how much will you be getting on a monthly basis that you need. It's somewhat easy to figure out. Whatever you're spending today, you probably want to spend tomorrow.
Yep.
But when you get your money from your paycheck, there's a lot of things that come out of that. Your taxes and your health insurance are two big ones in there. So we like to take a look at what you're spending now, and we like to project out what your taxes and your health costs might be in the future, because those will almost definitely be different in the future. And you have so much control, like we talked about, on the tax planning. So start with what you're spending now, but you have to have some good projections on what you are needing to spend for health insurance and taxes on top of that.
Well, spending is a huge piece, and I know we could probably spend 3.5 more hours on just that one bucket alone. But I think one word that comes to my mind would be realistic. You need to have a realistic estimate of what you spend now, or actually an accurate a number for what you spend now, but a realistic depiction of what you could be spending in the future. Because I think a lot of times you might find people that are a little off base, thinking, "Oh yeah, it's good. We're going to spend this," but it could be really off base once they crunch the numbers, right?
Oh yeah, it could be off base, and you ought to figure that out well ahead of time. If you can't spend what you want to spend in retirement, it's nice to figure that out before you retire instead of a month or two after you retire.
Yeah.
So that's why it's good to work with someone ahead of time and have some projections on what that spending might be. Some interesting things about retirement, too, is that a lot of people retire before they expect to. And so when you're meeting with a good retirement planner, yes, you might have it set in stone. You got your Excel spreadsheet. If I retire at 65 and I die at 95, then I know exactly how it's all going to work out if I get this exact inflation rate and this exact growth rate. Well, the whole point of an advisor is to help you make decisions and guide you through when things don't go exactly as planned.
Yeah.
And I got a feeling that whatever spreadsheets or assumptions you have are probably not going to happen exactly the way you put it on paper there.
Yep. Because we can look back the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years of our lives to go, you know what? The only thing constant is change, and you can have that estimate, that spreadsheet, but you got to have some if this then that variables that are factored into there.
That's exactly it. You got it.
So step 2, what is step 2?
Well, step 1 is what you spend in retirement. Step 2 is what you're going to make in retirement.
Okay.
You retire, you're still going to be making money. If you're married, you have a Social Security. Your spouse probably has a Social Security. We talk to a lot of people that have been with the same company for 20, 30, 40 years. They all still have pensions. Or they might have even switched between different companies with pensions. So you might have 2 or 3 different pensions, 2 different Social Securities. Even if you're single, you might have been married at some point in time. You might have a Social Security decision that involves your ex-spouse or your deceased spouse or your deceased ex-spouse. There's a lot of things that come into play, a lot of big decisions, and those decisions you get to make with your Social Security, your pension, are absolutely huge. You sign a piece of paper, you put your date on there, you send it in, and you're set in stone pretty much for all that stuff. So you better make some good decisions ahead of time. It could be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars of a difference on when you decide to sign and send in a piece of paper. So we want to make those decisions next. Your investments, those are down the road. You can change your investments more than once in a day, but you get your pension, especially Social Security too, you kind of get one shot at it in your entire lifetime. So let's make sure that those are some good decisions, some well thought out decisions ahead of time.
100%. So we're learning how to spend wisely, how to make money in retirement, and then what do you move to next?
Well, next is still not your investments yet. It's step 3. It's your short-term money. We figure if you're spending money, you're making money, there's probably a difference. Like you're probably not making enough in retirement to capture or help support all the spending. And that's why you have been saving for the long term. Except now you have a short term. And if you have a difference there, if you're relying on your portfolio, if you're relying on your investments for whatever it is, let's just say it's a couple $1,000s a month. If you need that couple $1,000s next month, you probably want to make sure it's there next month. That's short-term money. It probably shouldn't have anything to do with the stock market because you can't rely on the stock market for money next month, maybe not even next year, maybe not even next couple of years. So we like to make sure that you have some sort of a buffer, short-term type of money. Sometimes people call it a bucket strategy to say when I know I need a couple $1,000s or whatever the amount is next month, next year, maybe even next couple of years, I know it's in accounts that I can actually get to, that it's there, and it's not relying on the ups and downs of the stock market. And that's really just saying, how do I fill a gap? If I need thousands upon thousands of dollars every month to spend, I'm making thousands, but not quite all of it every month. Well, there's a difference there. Let's make sure that you have enough money every month. That's your short-term money that we want to focus on next.
Awesome. And then finally, we get to talk about some investments, right?
You got it. Step 4, that's your investments. You spent your entire life saving for the long term. It's kind of what you're used to. You feel like it's what's going to get you through retirement. And yes, it's the fuel for your retirement plan, but the retirement plan is the first and foremost thing, because you can make a lot of decisions on how much you spend in retirement, what you do with your pension, how much you set aside into your short-term bucket. But your long-term money, that's where you have the absolute least amount of control over it. So when you don't have control over something, you want to mitigate, you want to bring down the risk to an appropriate level. And so when you do have your investments, you do want it to be set aside for the long term, but you want to do the things that make sure you're not taking on crazy amounts of risk. You do the diversification, the asset allocation, the rebalancing, all those things that you have probably learned about for some time. The difference in retirement is that you no longer have a long term. You have a long term and a short term.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't recognize that. They either have been so focused on stocks for the long term, they don't recognize that they've hit retirement and they all of a sudden have a short term as well. Or they feel like they're in retirement, they don't have a long term anymore. Well, guess what? If you are married and you're 62 years old, on average, the second one of you will pass away at 92. You retire at 62, and there's 2 of you in the couple. one of you might be spending some money 30 years from now. So you definitely do have a long term. It's just deciding how much of your money is set aside for the long term. So there's kind of like two problems people take. They either forget that they have a short term and they just still keep their money all in stocks and they figure out it'll work out most of the time. You don't have it most of the time. You have it one time. That's why you need some short and long term money. Or they think, I'm done with the long term. I hit retirement. Well, you probably still have some 20 or 30-year money in your investments there. Maybe you ought to have some 20 or 30-year investments to back it up.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really great point. And I just love how typically when you hear the word retirement, you think money. So let's jump in right there first. But we're at step 4 before you even start talking about investments. So I really like your process.
We think you should control what you can control, and you should bring down the risk in the things you can't control.
Yeah.
And bring down maybe even the worry too. You think about, oh my goodness, the stock market's doing this and this from day to day. If your day-to-day money's in the stock market, there's probably a problem in retirement. You ought to have some day-to-day money in day-to-day investments, and that allows you to still take a long-term approach towards the money that is set aside for the long term.
Yeah.
So that's how we approach it. That's step 4. There's still one more step in the 5-step process, and that is what you leave behind. We figure you're either going to leave behind some bills or leave behind some money. And if you leave behind some bills, there's some estate planning things you ought to be looking at. And we're not talking about like your last credit card bill, like I want to let my last check bounce. We're talking about what happens when big, huge risks come in. When one of the spouses dies too early. One of the spouses dies too early, there could be thousands upon thousands of dollars that are lost on a monthly basis. We call that the survivor gap, where maybe you're making $10,000 a month when there's 2 of you, but it's only $6,000 a month when there's 1 of you. Yeah. We want to figure that out ahead of time, make sure you understand what that level of a gap is, and make sure you've got that gap covered. And there's different ways to cover that gap. Another issue, big risk in retirement, is one people are concerned about with long-term care costs. The longer you live, the worse your health gets, and the more your health care costs. And sometimes the way to plan for that is with long-term care insurance. We don't necessarily have a belief that you need long-term care insurance, but we think you do need a long-term care plan. So figuring out what you want to do when those long-term care costs pop up and where you want to live and who's going to be taking care of you, that's very important. And then you have that plan to say, well, okay, it's going to be coming out of this account, or I'm going to sell the house and move here. Or maybe you do buy the long-term care insurance. It's figuring out the plan that makes the most sense for you.
I love your step 5, which is leave, define and protect your legacy, because I know a lot of people know the term legacy. And typically you would think protect your legacy. But I like how you say define and protect, because it makes me think of the old the example of, don't be the person that climbs the ladder to success only to find that it's propped up against the wrong building. Meaning you could protect a legacy that is not the right legacy that you want to be building. So if you can define it ahead of time, now you can protect it the right way. So I really think that's such a critical piece to end with.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people think of legacy and they're just thinking more of, okay, I've left $1 million to my kids, things like that. Your legacy might be, did you plan ahead of time so that if you die too soon or live too long, that your widow still has enough money? Yeah. Your legacy might be, did I leave $1 million to my kids tax-free or completely taxable? And that goes beyond even just the money stuff like you're talking about too.
100%. Well, I just really think, I just really like your approach to things, Jeremy, and would really encourage people to visit your website, see what they can learn from you. What's the best way they can reach out and connect with you?
Yeah, appreciate it, Mike. It's been fun chatting about all these topics and get to know you for sure. But if people want to reach out, the best way to do that is go directly to our website, keilfp.com, KEILFP.com. Or they could check out our podcast, which is retirement-revealed.com.
Awesome. Well, I encourage everyone to check out both of those. And Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. It's been a great time.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.